Hello. General Hospital today will reveal Anna had been held captive for what felt like an eternity. Within the suffocating stone walls of Windermere, the infamous Gothic castle that now served as her prison, time seemed to blur in the deep, echoing chambers beneath the estate, where sunlight never reached and silence reigned like a tyrant. The dim bulbs lining the corridor flickered with a sickly yellow glow, casting long shadows across the cold, damp floor. The air was thick with mold and decay, and each passing hour only deepened the sense of isolation that clung to Anna like a second skin. But even as the darkness closed in, her spirit did not waver. Years of covert operations, of outsmarting war criminals and navigating the treacherous corridors of international espionage, had forged in Anna a discipline that could not be broken by confinement alone. She was not just waiting, she was watching. Sidwell had made a fatal miscalculation. He believed that by stripping Anna of her freedom, by silencing her voice and removing her from the board, he had neutralized the threat. What he failed to realize was that Anna, even in chains, remained a weapon. Behind her calm facade, she was methodically decoding the rhythms of captivity, the subtle timing of the guard rotations, the creak in the floorboards outside her cell, and above all, the patterns of Pascal. He was the one who brought her meals, who lingered long enough to indulge his own sadistic pleasure in mocking her helplessness. But Pascal, for all his cruelty, was predictable, and predictability was a weakness Anna knew how to exploit. She studied his posture, the way he reached into his coat, where he placed his hands, how he never locked the door fully behind him. She counted his footsteps, noted the seconds he turned his back, the moments when he allowed routine to dull his instincts. Day by day, Anna gathered every detail, waiting for a single crack to appear in the structure of her imprisonment. That moment came on a cold, mist-veiled evening. Rain tapped softly against the tiny window high above her cell, a dull patter against the iron bars that offered no real escape. Pascal arrived as usual, carrying a tray of food and a few tattered books, the illusion of compassion masking the control. But as he stepped inside, distracted and confident, Anna's body tensed like a spring. In one fluid, calculated movement, she lunged at him, her fingers seizing the edge of his coat where she knew the weapon was concealed. The struggle was fast and brutal. Pascal reacted too late. Surprise etched across his face as Anna wrestled the gun from his grip. He fought back, his strength fueled by panic. But it was no match for the precision and fury of a trained agent. They crashed into the table, food and metal clattering to the floor before Anna pulled the trigger. The sound of the gunshot shattered the silence like glass. Pascal collapsed, a lifeless heap on the floor, his eyes frozen wide in disbelief. Blood pooled beneath him, a dark red stain spreading across the gray stone like a final signature of his failure. Anna didn't pause to mourn. Her body surged forward, muscles driven by adrenaline and necessity. She ran, weaving through the serpentine halls of Windermere, past the shadow corridors she had only glimpsed during her forced transfers. Every turn, every stairwell felt etched into her mind after weeks of memorizing the layout. Her heart thundered in her chest, but her hands remained steady. She was alive and she was getting out. Yet just as escape seemed within reach, something caught her eye. A strange draft wafted from behind a crumbling bookshelf in one of the lower chambers. Instinct urged her to flee, but curiosity, and the instincts of a spy, pulled her toward it. With effort, she shoved the shelf aside, revealing a narrow passage leading into a hidden chamber. Dust filled the air, thick and untouched. What she found inside would forever change the course of everything. Stacked across a rickety table were folders stuffed with documents, audio cassettes, and countless photographs. The flickering light from a single desk lamp illuminated grotesque images. Children hooked to machines, elderly patients strapped to gurneys, and young adults with vacant eyes, victims of something far worse than imprisonment. Anna's hands trembled as she sifted through the evidence. Detailed research logs described neurological experiments, memory alteration protocols, and serum trials labeled as cognitive recalibration. Sidwell, under the cover of a Fox Medical Philanthropy, had created a lab of horrors. He wasn't just a captor, he was conducting human trials, using people deemed disposable by society. Homeless patients, psychiatric cases, runaway teens, all brought to Windermere, all sacrificed in the name of a mind control program so sinister it defied comprehension. These were not just experiments, they were acts of sanctioned torture, and Sidwell had masterminded them with surgical cruelty. Among the papers was a law book marked with initials tied to various donors, and silent partners, names Anna recognized from both her WSB days and Port Charles itself. It wasn't just Sidwell. This was part of a wider conspiracy with far-reaching arms and deep pockets, possibly even tied to remnants of the now-defunct DVX or rogue factions within intelligence agencies. One name in particular caught her eye, not because of its power, But because it was crossed out and marked containment failed, the victim listed under it was young, female, and still missing. Anna clutched the files, forcing her mind to focus even as dread crept into her bones. She had uncovered something catastrophic, and now she knew why she had been kept alive. Sidwell hadn't just been trying to break her spirit. He had been trying to buy time to test her limits, maybe even to use her. But he had underestimated her again. With the documents in hand and every step now heavier with purpose, Anna vanished into the storm outside the castle. The night swallowed her whole, but for the first time in weeks, she was free. And she was no longer just a fugitive. She was a witness to one of the darkest operations in recent memory. And she knew exactly where to go next. Jason needed to see this. Poor Charles needed to see this. And Sidwell needed to fall. Anna was staggered by the weight of the truth that had been hiding in the shadows all along. The suspicions she once harbored about Sidwell's operations and the whispered rumors about Jack Brennan's true nature had never been mere paranoia. They were fragments of a larger nightmare now crystallizing before her very eyes. As she pieced together the files, the experiments, the coded correspondences, and the photographic evidence within the hidden chamber of Windermere, it became achingly clear this place wasn't just a site of her own imprisonment. It was the heart of a vast and horrifying conspiracy. Sidwell hadn't just locked her away to silence a witness. He had done so to delay an inevitable reckoning, one that was now barreling toward him with terrifying force. Windermere, with all its secrets buried beneath the Gothic facade and cold stone, was not just a private fortress for a madman. It was a laboratory of horror, a vault of intelligence black projects, and a cathedral for twisted ambitions. A place where science and power had been perverted to serve the darkest urges of control. Anna realized she had stumbled upon the keystone to dismantling an intelligence network, operating outside the reach of morality, law, and perhaps even government oversight. She didn't escape the island as a mere victim, crawling away from torment. She emerged reborn, a silent witness bearing the firepower of truth, armed with knowledge capable of exposing the filth hidden beneath the institutions so many believed in. When news of Anna's escape reached Sidwell, panic set in like rot beneath the surface of a collapsing empire. The calm, calculating mask he wore began to crack. His every move, once composed and deliberate, became erratic. In his mind, every hour that passed meant the noose was tightening. Anna, alive and free, was more dangerous than any agent or enemy he had ever faced. She had seen too much, knew too many names, and could connect too many dots. Sidwell could no longer rely on shadows. He had to act, and fast. With desperation clawing at his every thought, he tapped into the corrupt web of contacts that had long protected his clandestine activities. Corporate backers, compromised officials, loyal mercenaries. Bribes were offered, threats were delivered, trails were scorched. The order was simple: erase everything, eliminate anyone who had helped Anna, and find her before the truth shattered the illusion he built so carefully. Meanwhile, miles from the chaos Sidwell was unleashing behind closed doors, Anna had found her way to the one person she knew she could trust without hesitation: Jason Morgan. Steady, unflinching, and bound by a code even blood couldn't alter, Jason had always been a figure of control in a world that was anything but. When Anna stood before him, haggard, eyes hollowed by captivity but burning with purpose, Jason didn't need her to explain. He knew something catastrophic had happened and that she wasn't just running. She was preparing for war. As Anna began to recount every second of what she had endured, Jason listened in complete silence. His face, always unreadable, slowly shifted as the brutal scope of what Anna had discovered came to light. When she spoke of the experiments, the way memories were being manipulated, how innocent people were being turned into pawns without consent, his stoicism began to fray, not from fear, but from rage. And when she told him that Brennan's name appeared in those files, not just as an observer, but possibly as an architect of the operation, a silence settled between them more damning than any shouted accusation. Jason had long distrusted Sidwell's polished image, sensing that beneath the charm was a man who played by a different set of rules. But now, with Anna's first-hand evidence, with the bodies left behind at Windermere, and with the connection to Brennan, a former ally turned enigma, the time for suspicion had ended. It was time to act. He assured Anna that whatever power Sidwell thought he had, it wouldn't shield him forever. Then, without ceremony, Jason moved like a blade in the dark. He initiated contact with PCPD in the quietest, most covert way possible, ensuring the leak wouldn't spread or be intercepted. Together, he and a small circle of trusted officers began laying the groundwork for a secret investigation, one that wouldn't appear in any official channels, not yet. Surveillance operations were launched on Sidwell's known affiliates. Anonymous leads were planted in strategic places to destabilize his network, and slowly, silently, the walls began to close in. Jason knew this had to be airtight. They would get only one shot to take Sidwell down without him vanishing into the wind, or burying the evidence under 10 layers of misdirection. But there was more. Jason couldn't ignore the implications of Brennan's name being tied to the operation. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a ticking time bomb. Brennan had access to WSB files, agents, and resources. If he had indeed gone rogue, then the conspiracy was bigger than Sidwell. It was systemic. And if the corruption reached that high, then anyone who stood with Anna would be marked. Jason understood what was at stake, not only for Anna's safety, but for Port Charles itself. The very people they had trusted to protect the city might now be its greatest threat. Anna, still reeling from the psychological trauma, found herself in the unfamiliar position of needing to rely on others. But she wasn't passive. With Jason's support, she began cataloging the evidence, constructing timelines, mapping connections, every face she'd seen in Windermere, every voice she remembered from behind the one-way glass. She knew that Sidwell would come for her, and she intended to be ready. Because this time, she wasn't just fighting for herself. She was fighting to expose the heart of a machine that had taken too many lives, twisted too many minds, and gone unchecked for far too long. And yet, in the quietest moments between planning, between strategizing, a chill would still settle over her. She knew that what she had uncovered was only a piece of something far greater. There were still gaps in the files, names she couldn't yet identify, links that hinted at a far more expansive network. Sidwell may have been a spider at the center of the web, but somewhere out there, other hands were pulling strings. The war had only just begun. At the Port Charles Police Department, the news of Anna Devane's miraculous escape spread like wildfire, sending shockwaves through every level of law enforcement. Officers who had once assumed Anna was missing, perhaps even dead, now faced the startling truth. She had survived unimaginable horrors of Windermere, and returned not only alive, but carrying the explosive makings of a national scandal. It wasn't just her survival that made headlines within PCPD. It was what she brought with her, damning evidence, a litany of documented crimes, and something even more volatile, the names and identities of potential living victims, who remained hidden, silenced, or imprisoned within Sidwell's shadow network. The magnitude of the revelations forced the department into immediate high alert. Commanding officers issued a full protective detail for Anna, recognizing that her life was now more in danger than ever. Sidwell, backed into a corner, would stop at nothing to eliminate the one person capable of unraveling everything he had built. Anna was no longer a former agent seeking justice. She had become the keystone witness in a case that, if exposed, could burn down entire corridors of clandestine power. Within hours, secure protocols were initiated, safe house locations were rotated, digital communications were scrambled, and access to Anna was restricted to only the highest-ranking, vetted individuals. Yet even with all these precautions, a sense of dread permeated the halls of PCPD. Because the danger wasn't theoretical, it was active, imminent, and closing in. What made the situation even more dire was that Anna didn't only bring documents or data. She came with knowledge of living survivors, victims of Sidwell's experimentation, who had not yet been freed. Some had escaped in silence, their minds fractured and memories tampered with. Others were still trapped in undisclosed locations, pawns in an ongoing game of manipulation and terror. The mission evolved instantly. This was no longer a case of protecting one asset. The stakes had shifted. The goal now was twofold: protect Anna at all costs and launch a coordinated effort to find and rescue the remaining victims before Sidwell could bury every trace of his crimes, or worse, dispose of the evidence permanently. Sidwell, meanwhile, found himself in unfamiliar territory, exposed. His carefully managed front, his manipulative charisma, and the layers of plausible deniability he had used for years were no longer enough. Anna's escape had cracked the foundation, and he could hear it beginning to crumble. Like any predator threatened by exposure, Sidwell did not retreat. He retaliated. From a secured location, he activated contingency plans long buried beneath layers of encryption. Trusted operatives were summoned, digital records were purged, and secondary locations were scrubbed of any traceable links. But even as he worked to destroy the past, Sidwell's eyes turned toward the present, specifically toward Jason Morgan. Jason's name had surfaced in Sidwell's internal reports more frequently in recent weeks. Quiet movements through Port Charles, unusual visits to storage facilities, whispers of encrypted files changing hands. Sidwell had reason to suspect that Jason, ever the ghost in the machine, was assisting Anna and possibly aiding law enforcement in piecing together the puzzle. That made him dangerous, a wildcard. And Sidwell knew better than anyone that a wildcard with Jason's skill set could ruin everything, if not neutralized quickly. Surveillance operations were discreetly launched, using proxy agents to trace Jason's movements and contacts. Sidwell wanted confirmation, and when he got it, he would strike. The battlefield was forming. Two men molded by shadows, both adept at striking without warning, now pitted against each other in a confrontation that was no longer avoidable. Jason operated with precision and purpose, bound by a moral compass forged in fire. Sidwell, driven by fear and a megalomaniacal hunger for control, was fueled by desperation and pride. And standing between them was Anna, not only the focal point of their conflict, but the mirror reflecting the choices each man would make. One to protect, one to destroy. And then came Valentine Casadini, once entangled with both Sidwell and Jack Brennan through operations buried deep within WSB's darker projects. Valentine had long walked the knife's edge between ally and enigma. His past was layered with allegiances, betrayals, and morally gray decisions that made even his closest confidants question where he truly stood. Now, with the walls closing in on Sidwell and Brennan's name surfacing alongside allegations of rogue operations, Valentine was pulled into the spiral whether he wanted to be or not. Valentine possessed knowledge, intimate, operational-level knowledge, of how WSB's inner machine worked, especially during the years where oversight was more illusion than reality. He knew the codes, the safe houses, the behavioral triggers of agents who had gone off-script. That made him an invaluable asset in decoding Sidwell's playbook, and possibly predicting his next move. But it also made him a liability, because what Valentine knew could also implicate him. Jason, ever cautious, hesitated before involving him. Anna, on the other hand, understood the risk but also recognized that they were running out of time. They needed someone who had walked through the fire and come out the other side. Someone who knew where the cracks were in the system and how to exploit them. Valentine fit that description perfectly. But could he be trusted? Valentine's motives were difficult to read. He claimed to want justice. He said he still cared for Anna. He hinted at a need to redeem his past. But in a world where manipulation was a currency and loyalty was fluid, words meant little. What mattered was action. Would he use what he knew to help bring Sidwell and Brennan down? Or would he use this chaos to position himself advantageously, navigating between Jason and Sidwell to ensure he survived the fallout, no matter who else burned? As the investigation deepened, alliances would be tested, shadows would shift, and amid it all, the clock continued to tick, not only for Anna's safety but for the lives of the others still hidden, waiting to be found. Port Charles stood on the edge of a revelation that could fracture its foundation. And at the heart of it stood three people, Anna, Jason, and Valentine, each bearing knowledge, each haunted by choices and each with the power to change everything. As night fell over Port Charles, the forces operating in the shadows began to move. Whispers about Windermere, about hidden laboratories, about a mind control project spread through the underworld like a virus. Figures who had long remained unseen started to step into the light. Buried secrets were dragged to the surface. And those who once believed themselves untouchable began to tremble as the truth gathered momentum. Anna, despite having escaped, could not find peace. She carried the weight of exposing everything she had uncovered, knowing all too well that the price could be her own life. Jason, driven by a warrior's instincts and a rare, unwavering loyalty, was the only person capable of standing beside her until the very end of the truth. But would they have enough time with enemies closing in from all sides and another secret darker, more dangerous still waiting to be uncovered? Buried deep within an undiscovered basement of Windermere? Perhaps this was only the beginning.